If you're hearing my voice right now, I need you to imagine something very carefully. Imagine sitting in a movie theater where the film suddenly stops right before the most important moment, and no one in the room can explain why. Now imagine realizing that what you just watched might not have been a movie at all. Before I continue, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Unblinking, because stories like this don't show up anywhere else. And trust me, by the end of this video, you might start looking at movies a little differently, especially the ones that end a little too early. I never told this story publicly before, not because I thought people wouldn't believe me, but because every time I think about it, something about that day still feels unfinished. My name isn't important. What matters is that 3 years ago I worked at a place most people never think about. It was a small film restoration facility on the edge of a quiet industrial district. We didn't make movies. We didn't distribute them. We simply restored old reels that were found in storage vaults, basements, or abandoned theaters. Sometimes they were forgotten classics. Sometimes they were things nobody remembered making. Most days were boring. The building smelled like dust, warm electronics, and the strange chemical scent of old film. My job was simple. I sat in a quiet viewing room and watched reels to check for damage before the restoration process started. The room had one desk, one projector, and thick soundproof walls. The only light came from the projector beam and a small lamp above my notebook. For hours, I would sit there alone, watching forgotten movies from the 1950s, the 60s, sometimes older. Most of them were harmless. But one afternoon, something arrived that no one in the building could explain. It came in a metal film canister with no label, no date, no studio mark. The delivery sheet simply said, "Recovered storage archive." That was normal enough. Strange things appeared in archives all the time, but when I opened the canister, the film inside looked newer. Not modern, but not old either. The reel was perfectly clean. No scratches, no dust. It looked like it had been sealed yesterday. I checked the leader strip at the beginning of the film. Normally that section tells you the title. T. Studio, sometimes even the year. This one had nothing, just a blank strip of film. I remember thinking it was probably some student project or experimental film that got lost somewhere. That kind of thing happened more than you'd expect, so I loaded it into the projector. The machine hummed softly as the reels started turning. At first, everything looked normal. The movie opened with a wide shot of a quiet suburban street in daylight. Children were riding bicycles. Cars passed slowly. Birds moved across the sky. It looked like something filmed in the early 2000s. The camera moved like a professional production. Smooth, steady, careful. A man appeared in the frame, walking along the sidewalk while talking on his phone. Nothing unusual. But then something strange happened. The camera slowly turned toward a small movie theater across the street. Not a big one. Just a narrow building with a faded marquee. And the title on the marquee made my stomach tighten, because the letters spelled out something very specific. Last showing today, the camera zoomed slowly toward the theater entrance. People were walking inside. A family with 2 kids. A couple holding popcorn, a man in a gray jacket. Everything looked normal, but the camera stayed outside, watching. Almost like someone across the street was secretly filming the theater. Then the scene changed. Now the camera was inside the theater lobby. The same people were buying tickets, talking, laughing, but something felt quiet, not silent, just slightly muted, like the room was filled with air that didn't move. I leaned forward in my chair while watching the reel. Something about the pacing felt different from normal movies. The camera didn't cut often. It just watched, slowly, patiently, almost like it was waiting. The scene moved into the theater room, rows of seats, dim lights, the audience settling in. And I noticed something that made my skin feel cold. The camera was sitting in the very back row, looking down at the audience. Exactly the way I was sitting in my own viewing room, watching a screen, watching people watching a movie. I wrote a note in my logbook. Unusual camera perspective. But I kept watching. The lights inside the theater dimmed. The screen inside the film flickered to life. And the audience inside the movie started watching their film. which meant I was now watching a film of people watching a film. It sounds confusing, but at the time, it just felt strange. The camera behind the audience slowly moved forward between the rows, passing people, passing empty seats, until it stopped 3 rows behind a man in a gray jacket, the same man from the sidewalk earlier. He sat very still, hands folded, watching the screen. Then the movie inside the movie started, but we never saw what was playing on their screen. We only saw the light flickering on their faces, and that's when things started feeling wrong. One by one, people in the theater began turning their heads, not toward the screen, toward the back row, toward the camera. At first I thought it was just part of the film's style, but then every single person in the theater slowly turned around. All of them. Children. Adults. The couple, the family, even the man in the gray jacket. They were all staring directly into the camera, into the back row, into the place where the camera was sitting, into the place where someone would normally be watching. And that's when the projector in my room made a sharp clicking sound. The film stuttered for a moment, then continued. Inside the movie theater, the people were still staring, not moving, not blinking, just looking straight at the camera. The silence in my viewing room felt heavier than before. I wrote another note in my logbook. Audience behavior unnatural. Then something happened that I still can't explain. The man in the gray jacket slowly stood up from his seat. He turned fully toward the camera, and he started walking up the aisle, toward the back row, toward where the camera was placed. Each step was slow, measured, careful, like he knew exactly where he was going. The rest of the audience didn't move. They just watched him. And the camera didn't demorb. It stayed perfectly still, waiting. I remember feeling a strange pressure in my chest while watching, the same kind of feeling you get right before something important happens. But the film didn't rush. The man kept walking up the aisle, row after row, seat after seat, until he reached the final step before the back row. Then he stopped. He looked directly into the lens, and for the first time in the entire film, he spoke. His voice was quiet, calm, almost conversational. He said, "You shouldn't be watching this yet." The projector in my room suddenly made another loud click. The image flickered, then continued. The man remained standing there, looking straight into the camera. And I felt something strange at that moment, because even though I knew this was a recorded film, it felt like he was talking to me. The man tilted his head slightly. Then he said something that made me sit up in my chair. He said, "If the film reaches the last scene, it means the event is about to happen." I paused my pen above the notebook. Event? What event? The man looked back, toward the audience inside the theater, then back at the camera. Then he said something even stranger. He said, "The movie always ends before it begins." Then the scene cut. Now the camera was outside the theater again. The sky looked darker, even though earlier it was daytime. People were gathering near the entrance. Police cars appeared in the distance. But something about the crowd felt wrong. No one was running. No one was shouting, "Tay weri hoost," watching the building. The camera slowly moved closer, close enough to see the theater doors shaking slightly, like something inside was moving or pushing. Then the scene changed again, back inside the theater. But now the seats were empty. Completely empty. The screen was still glowing, projecting light, but there was no film playing. Just white light and a low mechanical hum. The camera moved slowly down the aisle, toward the screen. Row after row of empty seats passed by until the camera reached the front and stopped it, facing the blank screen. That's when a shadow moved across the white light. Just for a moment, a human-shaped shadow, but there was no one in the room. The projector in my viewing room began making a louder sound, almost like the reel was reaching the end. Inside the movie, the theater door suddenly slammed open. People rushed into the room. Police, paramedics, workers, they were all shouting, running down the aisles. Searching the seats, one officer turned toward the camera. His face looked pale, confused. Then he said something to another officer, and even though the audio was faint, I could still hear it. He said, "Where did everyone go?" My hands felt cold at that point, because the theater in the movie had been full earlier. Completely full. But now, it was empty. Not a single person remained. No coats, no popcorn, no bags. Nothing. The camera slowly turned back toward the screen. The white light flickered, and another shadow moved across it. This time, longer, slower, almost like someone walking very close to the projector. Then the camera started moving again, but this time, it moved toward the exit. Up the aisle, toward... toward the doors, and I realized something strange. The movement felt different, less smooth, more human, like someone was holding the camera now. Instead of it being mounted, the camera reached the lobby, which was also empty. Chairs knocked over, tickets scattered, lights flickering, and then it reached the glass entrance doors. Outside, the street looked exactly the same as the beginning, except the sky was darker now, and the theater sign had changed. The letters no longer said last showing today. Now, they said something else. Something that made my stomach tighten again. The sign now read, "Event starts soon." The camera slowly zoomed toward the sign. Closer, closer, until the letters filled the frame. Then the film cut to black. Primera Hua Ited, thinking the next scene would start. But the projector stopped. The reel had ended. I rewound the film, checked the final frames. There was nothing after that. Just blank film. The movie simply ended. Right before anything actually happened. That evening I asked the archive manager if there was more footage. He checked the database. There was no record of the film. No estudio. No registration. Nothing. It was as if the reel had appeared from nowhere. The next morning I returned to the viewing room to watch it again. But the film canister was gone. The manager said it must have been transferred for restoration, but no one could tell me where it went. Weeks passed. Then months. Eventually I stopped thinking about it. Until something happened 2 weeks ago. I was visiting a friend in another city. We decided to watch a movie at a small local theater. It wasn't a big place. Just a narrow building with a faded marquee. And when we walked closer to the entrance, I felt something strange. Because the theater looked familiar. Not identical, but very close. And then I looked up at the marquee sign. The letters on the board said something that made my heart beat faster. Last showing. Today. Inside, people were buying tickets. A family with 2 kids. A couple holding popcorn. And a man wearing a gray jacket. Standing near the entrance, very still. Watching the room, maybe stress played tricks on my mind. Or maybe some places carry things we simply don't understand. But one thing I believe with certainty is this. Everything happens by the will of Allah. Nothing moves, nothing changes, and nothing touches our lives without His knowledge. Everything happens according to Allah's will, and maybe some questions are not meant to be answered. But here is the part that still keeps me awake. Because when we walked into the theater, I suddenly remembered something the man in the film had said. He said the movie always ends before the event begins. And that means if the film ever continued past that final scene, something terrible would finally happen. So before I end this video, I want you to tell me something in the comments. If you were sitting in that theater and realized the story you once watched was about to continue in real life, would you stay and watch what happens next? Or would you walk out before the event begins? And if this story unsettled you even a little, Share it with someone who loves strange mysteries, and subscribe to Unblinking for more stories that leave questions behind. Because sometimes, the scariest stories aren't the ones that show the ending. They're the ones that stop right before it begins.